dir noch angesäche, so bist du ihr aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschäche? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary Holy Land from the heathen. This is Dan Baltic. Unfortunately, we're not joined by Matt this week. He is, as you may have seen, he hosted a live event earlier this week with Alex Kazemi. He is running around doing stuff, very busy. But I'm very busy too, because I am here right now with none other than Big Dave Martel for episode 67 of New Right. Big Dave Martel of the Bizarchives. It's good to have you here, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Dan. I'm excited to be here. And I got to say, now you even got the heathens jumping on and helping you reclaim the Holy Land. So we're all in this together now.
That's right. We're it started off, it was just me and Matt, but now we got more people, which is really very helpful when it comes to reclaiming Holy Lands.
Oh yeah.
Just to give you a little intro here, that many people on our corner of Twitter are already familiar with the Bizarchives, with you, Dave, but you are the publisher of the Bizarchives. This is a pulp publishing company, and not a kind of theoretical publish a few books here or there, but you have a real catalog. You started only around 2.5 to 3 years ago. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but you have many books in your catalog right now, and indeed many anthologies, because each issue of the Bizarchives is the release of an anthology series of short stories in the pulp tradition. You cover biopunk, cosmic horror, cyberpunk, epic fantasy, and sword and sorcery. Those are the various subgenres of the overall genre that your work addresses. You have the Substack, the obelisk.substack.com, and you have the Bizarchcast, which is, actually a very creative name for a podcast there. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah. We do the Bizarchcast. We get all the Bizarre Kings and Bizarre Barians together to start talking. We talk about movies and just everything that is pulp adjacent. And I love that you said the pulp tradition, because it is truly a beautiful Western literary tradition. I also do a podcast with Mike from Imperium Press called Culture Dads, which is a lot of fun. Folks can go check that out. We do some of the similar stuff. We do a lot of culture critique or analysis. It's pretty much two based publishing dads getting together to do analysis for pop culture, history. Sometimes we get into theology, philosophy, and all kinds of stuff. We get into all kinds of stuff, but it's for folkish and dissident minds. So folks can go check that out at imperiumpress.org/podcasts. And I do exactly what you said. We publish, we have our main flagship, which is the Bizarchives itself, which is a collection of short stories from up and coming authors in the weird fiction scene. We pretty much do just about any pulp adjacent subgenre that's a little bit weird, a little bit psychedelic, a little bit spooky or heroic, or anything that's weird and cool and out there. We like it and we will publish it. So we've done everything from, like you mentioned, biopunk. Probably our main focus is cosmic horror or supernatural horror, but we do a lot of different horror stuff, creature features, cosmic horror, sometimes even more weird psychedelic sci-fi blend stuff. We've even had quite a few pulp noir, weird noir, as well as weird west, like westerns. We're all over the place. So any type of story that we think is weird and cool and interesting, we'll put out there. We also have we publish novellas and novels from our authors, guys like M.S. Jones, who we're actually going to have the second part of his epic fantasy series, Chronicles of Heraldria. We have Arbogast, who has done the Shanghai Horror. We have the great A. Cuthbertson, best-selling author, with both the Cosmic Horror double feature and Spire. We've got a lot of great stuff. C.P. Webster with the Horror Beneath. I have a collection of poetry and my collected short stories out called The Weird Works of Dave Martel. So we got a lot of stuff out there that we put out there. We also do a lot of reprints. So we've done Hodgson with House on the Borderland. We did Philip Francis Nolan's first rendition of Buck Rogers, which is called Man in the 25th Century. We've done, what else have we done? The Willows from Algernon Blackwood. Oh man, we have a series called Masters of Horror, which has included everybody from H.P. Lovecraft to Bram Stoker to freaking, who else? Just Arthur Conan Doyle. All the greats are in there. So folks that really want an introduction to the Arthur Machen, right? Arthur Machen, what a giant. So we've also published The King in Yellow in hardback. So we've got, and also we published Lord Dunsany's Gods of Pagana. So we've done like the primordial beginnings of fantasy and horror and everything, because going into this, it was kind of twofold. I wanted to lift up guys that have been railroaded and blackballed by the really, really corrupted, politically motivated industry that are really talented and write awesome stuff. I wanted to give them a chance to get out there. And then also I wanted to have these greats from yesteryear that we love, our literary heroes, and I wanted to have them in my catalog with their books written as is, because as we all know, the activists out there are getting their writhing, disgusting, despicable claws and re-envisioning and rewriting these beautiful masterpieces from our ancestors, and it's an absolute travesty. It's an abomination. So what we do is we reprint them and we ensure that the works are presented as they were in their time and stay protected as such forevermore. No negotiations, no capitulation. We want to protect those beautiful cultural relics forever because they're special and they need to be protected. So that's what we're all about. We're all about the new and the old, these traditions all coming together to promote and sell and give pulp and weird fiction, these awesome literary traditions, back to the people in an affordable, accessible way.
Absolutely. And as you're saying this, what strikes me, and I want to get into a little bit later, what is pulp, and in kind of definition of that, and a deep dive. But what strikes me is all of these titles, all of this body of work, and I want to give a special shout out here to friend of the pod, Arbogast, who put us together for this episode. He, the Shanghai Horror, everyone should buy that. It's a great novella. Jordan Allen, another friend of the pod, I believe you've published.
Yep.
And want to give those shout outs. But what strikes me is, a lot of people on our side are starting publishing companies. They're, starting various kind of ventures and putting out content. But you, in a span of a few years, have put out a tremendous amount of content, a tremendous amount. This is, something that a publishing house with many editors and staff would be, they would be satisfied and, impressed to have put out what you've put out over the course of the last 2 years. But this is the Bizarchives is something that didn't exist 2.5 years ago. It's something that came to you during COVID.
Mm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, how you got started and how
So
you grew to where you are today?
absolutely. So oh man. So COVID hits. I lose my job. My wife is pregnant with our third child, our baby girl. And we were at the time we were house shopping. We were getting ready to buy our first house together.
Mm,
And after years of job to job to job trying to raise our kids, we lived in shitty apartments, we lived in garages of family members, we've lived in spare room. Like finally we're getting ready to move up as the American dream shattered.
yeah,
And I got, I'm full honestly, I got very depressed. That messed me up. You know what I mean? There's years of work. You don't just like decide to buy a house one day. That's something
yeah.
you grind for. And I grinded for a long time. And the line of work I was working in, I worked in culinary. It's not a lot of
Mm,
money in culinary. If you want to make
mm,
money in culinary, you have to grind. And I did. I worked so much. My second son, I feel so terrible about this. I barely saw him grow up.
mm,
And that went into kind of my the way that I see things now. I never wanted to do that again. I never wanted to, because when you're a father and you look at like videos of your kids growing up, right? You see like Google does this thing, and this really hit me. Google does this thing automatically. It took all the videos and pictures of the kids from my wife's phone and put together this
Oh yeah.
collage with the nice music, and they did it on my second son's fourth birthday or something like that. And I felt it was like a dagger in my heart. I was like, I don't remember any of this because I was at fucking work, wage
Mm,
slaving. And I'm not saying in no disrespect to the dads out there that have to do that. My heart goes out to you. You have my support. I love you guys, man. Power to the dads. But that is heart wrenching when a father has to see that and realize that. So I was
mm,
like, I need to figure out something that I can do from home, number one. And that was what later on, I came to this realization. But, anyways, I lost everything. And you know what? I was like, I need to create. I need to create something. So I had $200 left over from my stimulus check. Everything was kind of just messed up. And I was like, you know what? I need to build something. So I wrote a few stories. I put up some things on Facebook and on Telegram. And I said, hey, guys out there that like authors like H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, Weird Tales Magazine, this kind of stuff. Send me your stories, and I want to try to put this project together. It's called the Bizarchives. And I got some stories. The first story I think I received was from Mr. A. Cuthbertson, who's with us today.
mm.
He's well known for his series in the Bizarchives of the character Count Coralor. He did the Cosmic Horror double feature. He's like his book Spire made it to like number 8 in the UK on
Amazing.
Amazon. But yeah, he was a bestseller in the UK with that book. So and that's actually shout out to Aristophanes on Twitter. He
Oh
gave
yeah.
us he gave us a boost, and that from there that skyrocketed. So I owe everything to him for that success. But anyways, I put this thing together, and I was like, you know what? Our first issue, I was like, this is actually pretty cool. And I put it out there, and I was like, you know what? If I sell X amount, I can't remember the number I had in my head. I was like, if I sell X amount of copies for the rest of the year, I'm going to count this as a success. I quadrupled that in like the first week of debut.
Amazing.
And then I blew every milestone I had just with the first issue. And now looking back with our issues now, that issue wasn't, I'm very proud of it. It was good for the time. I'm proud of that. That was our debut. The stuff we're doing now blows it out. So that's it. It has gone since out of print, but that first issue propelled us to go on this wonderful trajectory. And since then, we have put out so many different books. And eventually, I was like, you know what? I'm at the point now because I started working again. I was like, I can't both work and do this the way that I want to do it.
Mm,
So I stopped doing the work that I was doing, and I was like, you know what? I'm burning my bridges, no retreat, all in. I
I
believe we
love
can
it.
do this, and we did it. And now, I'm not making, we're not high on the hog, we're not whatever, but we're getting to the point that my bills are paid, and we're getting to the point that I can pay guys royalties, and we're getting to the point that I can hire artists and XYZ and do all this kind of stuff. And since then, not only like you mentioned our catalog, which I'm very proud of. We have a pretty darn big catalog for we have maybe I think we have like if we have a whole crew of everybody that works on every single book, 5 guys, 5 bros have gotten together. And we had less before. It was like me and another guy, our lead editor, Cypress Walter. And then our authors came on and they also double as editors. So with this small crew of bros, passionate bros, we put this thing on our back and we've put out we probably have 15 books out, which, like you said, there's not a lot of companies out there that can compete with that level of work. So I was like, I don't have the money, I don't have the capital, I don't have this, but I'll tell you what I do have. I have heart, I have passion, I have love, and I'm the type of guy that if I go on a mission, I'm a fucking force of nature. Big Dave is a force of nature when he wants to be, and I want to be here. So we went hard, and now we have a good friend of the scene, Lord Wolfshield, who put out a short film adaptation of one of our stories. We have our good friend named Fornall, who's a lead dev on a project, a video game project that's based off of one of my fantasy characters, Lucius Lex, and his world Grim Earth. We have a tabletop game based off of some of our worlds coming out. We have a fantasy card game coming out. We have like all of these different avenues of ways that we're going. I'm teaming up with Mr. Mike from the Culture Dads, and we're gonna do a record company. It's already in the works. We already have the equipment and everything. So we are attacking every domain. So this is what happened. A few years back on Millennial, I was actually my first appearance on Millennial. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Oh yeah, no, I am. Yeah,
I appeared on Millennial for the first time last year. Shout out to my buddy Millennial Woes. Finally,
yeah.
Big Dave finally got his chance on the big stage with the Millennial. But a few years back on Millennial, I was listening to Millennial Woes and Morgoth talking, right? And they were saying, talking, and they were taking questions, et cetera, et cetera. And, Mr. Morgoth, I actually reached out to him. I don't know if I can't remember if I reached out to him before that or maybe after that, but he name dropped the Bizarchives on it, right? And I was really impressed. I didn't know we were reaching that far, that somebody as big as Morgoth heard about us. So I listened, I tune in, and people are asking, what are we going to do about video games? What are we going to do about film? What are we going to do about literature? What are we going to do X, Y, Z? He's like, well, we already have some guys that are doing pretty good in literature, but he's like, I don't know about film. I don't know about video games. I don't know if we can achieve these things. Music, these are kind of out of our reach. It's going to be really hard. And I sat there with a notepad and I wrote down everything that he said that we couldn't do. And I was like, I'm out to prove Morgoth wrong. Not because I dislike Morgoth. I really love his content. I'm a big fan. I'm a Morgoth fan, which I eventually made it onto his podcast, which I was like, I was really enamored with that because I've been listening to him for a long time. Shout out Morgoth. But anyway, I wrote down everything that he said we couldn't do. And I was like, I'm going to prove this motherfucker wrong. And guess what? We did. And on just about every single aspect. Video games are a lot of work. We're not there yet. That's a big project that needs a lot of work yet. But we have a demo. We have a demo out.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's functioning. We have a game that's coming. So what I wanted to prove with this is that if you have the passion and you have a bunch of ferocious, loyal, smart guys, a small group of driven, smart people can go pretty far. And what we're putting out is not really our video game isn't going to be a AAA game. The short film that came out was a B flick, right? Because that's what the budget was. You're not going to do, you got to keep in mind what we're working with. Our books, I believe, look really nice and are really good. Are they as polished as maybe something from Penguin Random House when they do a hardback book or whatever? Probably not. This is very kind of, it's above DIY, but this is underground shit. This is raw. This comes from the heart. This comes from passionate artists that want to bring their visions to fruition. So it's going to be a little rough around the edges. And you know what? I embrace that because I think, because me, myself, I think that shit's dope. I love bands like that had the first album and it was recorded on an 8-track cassette and it's got a little bit of tape hiss and it's kind of shitty. I love those albums. I love them. Slayer's first album, Iron Maiden's first album, all of the great metal bands, their first albums. How many people think that Kill 'Em All is Metallica's best album to this day? Tons of people. That's kind of a shitty album. It's not really it doesn't sound that good, right? But
True.
people love it. There's an authenticity, there's heart to it, there's a magic to that. And eventually we're going to professionalize even further and we're going to grow out of that phase. But I'm not expecting us to write Wagnerian symphonies and stuff like this. This is what's within our reach, within our grasp, and what we're able to do. And in my opinion, not just us, but all of the little publications and little art gangs and crews in our sphere are doing a fucking bang up awesome job at doing it. And our little underground projects and the stuff that's coming out of our underground blows out the mainstream. The mainstream can't even hold a candle to what we're doing. Our shit is dope. So that's kind of the story. Sorry for filibustering.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's 100% true. And what jumps out at me here is, yes, you guys are talented, you're committed, but one of the reasons why there's such you've been so successful is that there's an appetite for the work that you're producing that is not being fed by the mainstream. I've listened to your episode with Prudentialists, by what you've called fempub, which I think is an awesome term, and it really does describe the publishing industry today, which is woke and paused and what have you.
Yeah,
and it's just it's fun to it's institutionally at this point. And, this wasn't always true. I mean, obviously you're, republishing classics that were very good. Of course, that's why you're republishing them. But at this point in the industry, they're just incapable of producing anything that's good because their, propaganda, dictates that they, essentially we could get into it further. But I mean, it's really hard to tell like heroic stories in the in this climate and context. So it's it's very not astonishing, but it's very it's heartening to see that there's such an audience for these type of stories, this type of fiction, that you can grow with little, resources beyond your own grit and, intellect and creativity to where you are today from $200 and, and an idea to an actual publishing company that is, making money, profitable, publishing many novels every year. That's a testament to the fact that this is work that they can't get from Penguin. They can't get from Simon and Schuster because, like, I mean, I don't read the whatever fantasy that the mainstream is putting out, but I assume it's like akin to the young adult Lord of the Rings sequels stuff that's just very like you don't want to read that because it's in essentially like spoon feeding you. Not only is it does it offend the reader because it spoon feeds them propaganda that they don't agree with, it also just it's not entertaining because it's just a bad story.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that we've run into is that so our goal is to not be propaganda at all, right? I have political beliefs. There's guys in our crew that have political beliefs. Everybody in 2023 has political beliefs. The only real political stance that we have is we just don't want any weird, gross stuff. right? We don't want furry transgender orgies, and we don't want that kind of weird stuff. We don't want gross debauchery. I mean, we want some, but I mean, not the really bad kind. We want the awesome kind, and
Absolutely.
the entertaining, uh, the stuff that was edgy in the '80s. You know what I mean? That's what
Yeah.
we want. Edgy for the '80s is what we want. But so that's not what we're about, and that's why I think folks like it so much, because we're not preaching, we're not propagandizing, we're not evangelizing, we're not doing any of that. We just want to give people a good time. We want to make you feel we want to make you feel heroic. We want to take you on a journey. We want to scare you. We want to put ideas in your head that are psychedelic and bizarre. We want to take you to far-flung alien worlds, and blood and guts and mayhem and sexy ladies, and we want all of that combined, just sensationalism, sensation. Because to me, that's what art is about, is to deliver that sensation to the audience. And that's what the core of our philosophy is. We're not interested in teaching people about fucking, whatever, right? And also, here's the deal, is if you have the position that we do, the bad guys that are trying to do activism and pollute and corrupt things, they view that as a political act. Just writing a story with a handsome, dashing hero and he falls in love with a beautiful girl, to them, that is like a political act. To have a noble, strong king in your story is a political act to them. To us, it's not. And it's really not. It's just we are the standard. We don't need to react to them. They are reacting to us. We are just doing things the way it's supposed to be done. Everybody in history agrees with us and disagrees with them, period, on everything. So we don't even need to try to explain ourselves, just be.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that tradition, the stories that have like been traditionally popular, the hero quest stories, if you read Joseph Campbell, there's like, archetypes across civilizations, like this is who a hero is, this is what he does. There's a reason why this is, as you're saying, there's a reason why this is appealing. And by kind of, so the, fempub, as we've called it, they don't like the hero archetype.
No.
they want to introduce something that is different, something that is, but it doesn't work because it's not, built into, it doesn't conform to reality. The reason why these archetypes work is because they conform to a reality or a desired reality. Like if you're a young boy growing up, like you have fantasies of, military valor and, winning women and winning spoils or what have you, winning, glory or acclaim. And this is something that like men want to read about. You don't want to read about the stuff that they're telling you now, which is like the opposite of that. It's like, how men learn to, be gay or something. Yeah. It's not, I can't imagine. I would hope that, the new generation doesn't want to read stories like that. So it's just like they essentially, to get back to why your stories are appealing, it's because you're telling the stories that have historically been appealing because they conform to human nature. And
exactly.
the publishing industry is, trying to tell the, fempub, the regime, whatever we want to call it, are trying to tell stories that are, do not conform to human nature and present, visions and ideals that are alien, and just people don't really want to read it. Like they might agree with it, they might, they're soldiers or activists might be like, but they don't want to pick up books and read about it because it's, it doesn't, speak to them, because it's, it doesn't speak to anyone. So yeah, I mean, I think we're at a unique moment in time where, just by virtue of being a champion of the stories that people are born to like, you can, develop a substantial following. and a substantial place in the marketplace of ideas. And I'm happy to see that you're doing this, and that across our side of the internet, where I mean the tagline of New Right is reclaiming the literary holy land, and
Mhm.
that's a bit tongue in cheek, but there's always some truth said in jest.
Yeah, I've actually referred to what we're doing as a jihad.
There
So,
we go.
yeah. But no, you hit on something there that's money. So detractors, people that don't like what we do, right? And they're seething, right? They're really starting to seethe that we're doing this and we're beating them and we sell more books than them. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
Obviously we can't compete with the industry darlings like the Sandersons and the Stephen Kings of the world, but these low level people on Twitter that have 20-30,000 fake followers and claim that they're a signed published author, we blow them out. We're not even in the same room. But our detractors will say is, well, you guys are just clinging on to the past and clinging, and they're pretty much saying that we're trying to just appeal to history for the sake of whatever, right? The truth of the matter is, the kind of stories that we tell are not good because they're old. They're good because they're in line with our nature.
Exactly.
They're mythopoetic, right? Um, and this is something that will never die. Tolkien had a very great analogy, he called it the pot of soup, and some people call it the cauldron of stories. There are certain archetypes and themes, the modern or motifs. The modern way of describing these, they'll say tropes. I don't really like this word trope because it has a negative connotation. Because among people with postmodern priors, just presuppose that novelty is always good, that that they're always like trying to look for the next new thing.
Yeah.
They don't want to. They're always trying to reinvent the wheel, and because of that, they go into bizarre directions that don't like really slap. They don't hit. They don't hit home.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I'm saying is that these motifs and these tropes, there's no such thing as a new idea. With Tolkien's pot of soup, the way he described it is there are these story elements that have been told over and over and over again, going back all the way into the mists of our ancient history. And every new epoch, we dip our ladle into the pot of soup and we pull out the same ingredients, except they're just seasoned a little bit differently. They're just arranged a little bit differently. And that's a good thing. And that's a good thing. And as long as people are dipping their ladle into the pot of soup, forever will we tell good stories, and forever will we remember how to give people thrills and chills, and forever will we remember what heroes look like. A future where we forget what heroes look like and what bad guys look like, and we forget how to entertain and give sensation and these most beautiful deep just pre-rational elements of the human experience.
Mm.
A future where we forget all of this is a grim, bleak, barren future that is no longer human. And I fear that. And I want to avoid that like the plague. But I believe that as long as we play our cards right and we continue doing what we're driven to do, we drink the mead of poetry and we embrace the furor poeticus, forever will we tell these stories. And no matter how bleak and dark and shitty the future becomes, we will hold these things in our hearts forever. So that is what I believe. So, like I said before, our ancestors, our heroes, the literary giants, and all of the great, most brilliant men in all of history agree with us on everything all the way and disagree with them on everything all the way. That's it.
Absolutely.
We don't need to. I got you. You're back.
All right. All right. There we are. Okay. There we go. Yeah. No, I mean, 100%. The stories of old are successful and appeal to us for a reason, and that reason is biological. And that's that's a hard pill for fempub, as we call it, to swallow. But
I'd say it's spiritual too. I would say it's spiritual.
Yeah, spiritual and biological, and but I mean, it's a white pill for us because it is, proof that no matter what they're saying out there, no matter what they're trying to get people to believe, it's not going to work because we're just hardwired to want certain stories and certain things. And I remember on your episode with Prudentialist, you said that when Superman is long forgotten, people will still remember Conan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's quite right. I think that, though I don't dislike Superman, I don't dislike, the kind of comic book heroes that we've been raised on. I remember when I was an undergrad in college reading the Iliad for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, like struck by, wait a minute, these guys they're really like braggarts. They're like really like, they're like talking about how great they are and how much everyone else sucks. And they're like killing people who are sleeping. I'm just like, this doesn't seem like what a hero would do. But like in fact, throughout history, that is closer to, the masculine heroic ideal than the kind of like, oh, shucks, I'm just, a nice guy. I don't really want to get laid or do anything too wild. I just want to save the day and, make sure I don't beat up any bad guys too bad because they have rights too. That's like, that's not really I mean, it's a version of what being a hero is like, but it's not quite what we've historically understood the term to mean. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, the whole superhero type of narrative it starts from liberal priors. It's exactly what it is. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to get too far into politics and theory and all this kind of stuff, but liberalism presupposes egalitarianism. It presupposes like
Mm,
individual autonomy and individualism. It presupposes free will. It presupposes that effectively people are just modular humans. It presupposes
mm,
nurture over nature. It's this thing of, and I mean, me and you are almost the same age. How many times in school did we hear you could be anything that you want? And that's just
true.
not true. That's
Yeah,
not true.
absolutely.
Unfortunately, Johnny, that has a 95 IQ, can't become the president. He can't become an astronaut. He can't become a scientist. He's just not
Yeah.
capable of it. Not that he's a bad guy. And society, I actually think it's a horrible crime that Johnny with 98 IQ has to live with this idea that he could never fulfill, like
Yeah,
reach for the
absolutely.
stars. We should say, Johnny with 98 IQ, you can be a laborer. You could be, not that I'm not busting laborers, but we need laborers. There is nobility in being that. There's nobility in being a custodian or being whatever you are. There's nobility in that because
Absolutely.
we need those people. Not everybody can be a hero. In fact, only a couple guys can be a hero. And this is where I depart from Joseph Campbell's, his hero of many faces, is that the hero is of noble birth,
Mm,
right? Beowulf was of noble birth.
mm,
Achilles is of noble birth. Odysseus, noble birth. Conan, of noble birth, right? These people are of noble bloodlines that are of higher caste, right? We don't have this. The idea of the caste is completely just abominable to a modernist. But to the
yeah.
ancient people, this was a beautiful thing. And that gave them hope that there were people that could be born that had superpowers that were above and just were great. And with
Cut out there for a moment, Dave.
are you back? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah,
There's
now I
something
hear you.
there's something funky going on my
No,
internet.
that's
I'm
it's
very
okay.
sorry.
These things happen.
So what was the last thing I said?
That you know, it's the the heroic archetype is biological. It's about bloodlines. It's about the aristocracy. That seems to
Well,
be the
biological is putting it in materialist terms.
fair enough. Yeah.
If you read something like Rigsthula from the Poetic Edda, it tells the story of how the castes came to be, and it says that Rig, who is thought to be Heimdall, or historically was King Skef, who is probably the primordial king of Northern Europe, sired all the great kings. In fact, all the great kings from Alboin to the Aethelings to everything claimed to be of his lineage. and I believe that they were telling the truth. They said that this divine person came to, or emanation or avatar, or maybe even the god, one of the gods themselves in disguise, came to Earth and sired the castes, right? Cone the Kingly was of the king's caste, right? The Jarl caste. And then he sired the Thrall caste, and he sired all of the castes, right? The Carl caste. And these people had functions in society. And this gave an organic, natural order to society. So our people of our ancestors of the ancient world were not appalled by the idea of somebody that is that's just made of superior stuff. And in fact, it gave them hope and they liked it.
Absolutely.
So when you look at like a Superman or a Batman or whatever, they have to. All right, I'm back again.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No worries, man.
So, where was I? What was the last thing I said before I cut out?
That, a Superman or a Batman, when we get to, these, modern superheroes, they're based not on the, they don't come from the older understanding of the social order, but from the newer liberal understanding, I think.
Yes, exactly. So Conan, the reason Conan is just immortal and people will like him forever is because he is the son of Odysseus. He's a son of Beowulf. So yeah, that's my take on the heroic archetype.
Okay, great. Yeah. No, I mean, like, it is, very much when I was reading the Iliad, I was just struck like, oh my God, this is a totally different understanding of men and, male nature and the what it means to be a hero. But then, like, as you kind of go on and you read more and also you live more, you experience more, you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's something to this. There's something to this that speaks very deeply to men.
Yeah.
And
it's called the Mary Sue. Superman is the Mary Sue, or the Gary Stew, they call it sometimes. The Mary Sue is a failure of understanding heroism. The hero is not, like, for anybody familiar with Nietzsche, right? The Übermensch. The hero is the Übermensch. He exists above our laws. He exists above our capabilities. He is the Superman, the Overman, and he does not have the same moral compass that we do. He's not of the same morality that we are. So he's allowed to go. Sometimes he's cruel. Sometimes he's vicious. Sometimes he's virile. Sometimes he's ostentatious. Sometimes he just does things because he feels like it. Right. This is the hero, the guy that does this. And he is my buddy Mike from Imperium Press describes this as he's the Odinic man, right? He is like Odin, where he is a force that comes in and shakes things up, right? He's not Superman is like, oh, truth, justice, and the American way, and goody two shoes, and all this kind of shit. And that's just not how heroes are. A hero is virile. A hero is raw and rugged, and all of these kinds of things. And if he wants to go bed this maiden because it feels good, he will. If he wants to go get this treasure so he can just build a castle and build a statue to whatever he wants to do, he's going to do. Right? That is the hero. And that is why Conan is so based, because he does. Sometimes there's no rhyme or so. Modernists, here's another thing, is that they purposely misrepresent Howardian heroes. Conan, for example, they make him seem like he's this big, dumb goofball. He's not. Conan is brilliant. He's of great cunning. And a lot of times he avoids physicality to use his mind instead. And this is something that the hero can do, right? But the thing is with Conan is sometimes he just goes on adventures for the fuck of it and doesn't even need to justify it. Queen of the Black Coast. That story starts is that there is a ship of pirates and Conan just pops up out of the ocean. Who knows where he came from? Flops onto the boat. And he's like, he's here now. Now our adventure starts. He doesn't need to say where he came. He doesn't need a reason. He's like, let's roll. That's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He goes into the Tower of the Elephant and search for the jewel because he wants the jewel. And that's based, right? And Stephen King, who has a big swollen goofy head and looks like a burn victim, he he describes it. He says, "Oh, this is just male power fantasy. Like this is a bad thing." Let me tell you, if young men are going to fantasize about anything, let them fantasize about power, right?
Absolutely.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that jumps out at me, and I don't want to make this too political, but when people, and this is something that, they talked about a lot more when Trump was president and what have you, that they're like, well, he's not a real man or whatever because he's not honorable or this or that. And there's, many things you could spill a lot of ink about, whatever, indiscretions or such things. But in terms of what struck me is it's a misunderstanding of what it means to be a man, and that people who said that like Trump isn't a real man, I think they just are operating from a framework where they don't understand what it is to be a man the same way historically people have understood what it means to be a man. And so the kind of the qualities that, he was excoriated for, like being, cruel or merciless or too horny or whatever. I mean, actually, throughout history, those were seen as, to some extent, manly qualities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're working. So I would go a step further. I would say they do absolutely understand the masculine and the feminine nature. They just hate it. It
Fair
makes them want
enough.
to.
Yeah.
They are spiteful mutants, and it makes them sick. Things that are natural and good and holy and wholesome and the way things should be makes their skin crawl. They just hate nature. They hate natural law, and they want because they worship themselves, and they want to see themselves upon the throne of God. And that's just, they're it's just not going to happen. And in fact, those who try to climb up and sit at the top of the world tree in the throne of the King of Heaven will fall and tumble and hit the earth very hard. And that's what's in their future.
So yeah, let's get into what is in your episode with Prudentialist. I think you said something to the effect of pulp is the DNA of all current art. And pulp on our side of the internet, there's a lot of interest in it. Apocalypse Confidential, their kind of theme, motif, mission statement, it involves pulp. It was grown out of the Elroy Boys podcast to a certain extent, which is about James Elroy, a noir pulp type writer. And in general, just on our side, there's an affinity for pulp. So you being a master of pulp, what do we mean by pulp?
So it gets a little bit hairy because pulp traditionally refers to a format or a medium, I should say. Pulp in its heyday being it started in the late 1800s, but a lot of people will refer to the golden age of fiction being the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And during this time, when you said pulp, people would think of pulp magazines. These were usually 6x9 sized, like books that were very cheaply made with using pulp paper, which pulp paper was the paper that was made from wood pulp that was left over from making good paper. So it was crap. They were also called dime novels because they cost between a dime and a quarter. And the people loved these. This was like I guess you could say like the Netflix of its time. This was what everybody was reading. You couldn't go anywhere without pulp magazines being on all the shelves. There was thousands of them, thousands. Who even knows how many? Probably millions and millions of copies of this stuff was produced. It was so widespread that people would use them to as like paper for, I don't know, just anything. Anytime they needed extra paper, they would just like use an old pulp mag. And unfortunately, because of the nature of this paper, the overwhelming majority of every publication that existed has since disintegrated. So we don't have that many examples. I have one that was printed in the 50s that was given to me by an elder in my faith community, and it is like handling some sort of medieval artifact. It feels like it's going to fall apart in your hands. It is, unfortunately, they didn't survive. However, in today's world, pulp can mean that, but it's also kind of a vibe. Pulp is a vibe for anything that's sort of underground fiction, underground stuff from up and coming authors, things that are generally in adventure fiction or horror fiction, things that are weird fiction like we do, stuff like guys, I would put Aegeon Sci-Fi Illustrated, my buddy Brendan Hurd from Arius Press. I would put him in there. I would put Savage Frontiers in there. There's actually Mr. T.R. Hudson, author of Automaton, which we did a review on our Substack. Mr. Arbogast is coming out with Double Dealer, which is actually named after a pulp publication from that era. So we have a lot of this stuff. Pulp then was replaced later on by mass production paperbacks, ace paperbacks, a lot of people call them, in the 60s and 70s and so forth, which were still kind of in the same vibe, but it sort of fell off in the 80s. Now, the influence of the stuff that came out of the pulp era of pulp fiction cannot be understated. Everything good that we now know as modern media has its roots in pulp. Pulp was the big bang of modern media, period. It influenced everything. You can't think of a movie. You can't think of a genre of fiction. You can't think of anything today that is not, at least fictionally, right? Related to pulp in some way, is part of that lineage. It was the big bang. Even things a lot of people won't even realize, things like The Godfather, the series The Sopranos, the spaghetti westerns, the Clint Eastwood movies we all love. All of the great action flicks, the Arnold movies, Star Wars, everything, even into music. You can't, especially things like the various heavy metal genres that many of us like. Are you drinking a Celsius now too?
I am drinking a Celsius, double fisting here.
We are of the same taste. I wish I had my camera set up. LaCroix and Celsius are exactly what I'm drinking.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. It's a little power in the Celsius, a little cool down with the LaCroix.
Yeah, a little refreshment with the LaCroix. Hell yeah. That's so weird. So anyway, even in genres of music, you can't get away from the influence of pulp. It was just the way magazines are set up, the format itself, the way that they're laid out, came out during the pulp era. Comic books, the pulp era. The comic book heroes that you think, we're just talking about Superman and his ilk are direct, I would say, were plagiarized from the pulp era. You could say Superman is literally a ripoff of Doc Savage. Doc Savage is the Man of Bronze. He lived in the top of the Empire State Building. He had a team of guys called the Fabulous Five. He was a super soldier. He knew all this martial arts. He was rich, had all these contraptions. The Shadow is literally like Batman is just a retelling of the Shadow. You can't get away from pulp. Mark Hamill's character in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, is Buck Rogers. He even dresses like Buck Rogers. And in fact, in George Lucas's first big film, THX 1138, which I'm actually writing an article about as we speak, there's the old Buck Rogers show is playing on one of the screens in one of the things. So these guys, Flash Gordon, John Carter of Mars, Tarzan, Conan, Solomon Kane, you can't get away from the influence these characters had. Not just them, the romance novels of that time. All romance novels today, that nasty, degenerate smut that like these ladies like now, that they were reading nasty, degenerate smut from the pulps. It's not different. There's nothing different. the war stories, all of the awesome like war story movies that we watch, Platoon, and even things like MASH, Saving Private Ryan. Those come from the pulps. Those are literally the pulps. The Godfather is literally a pulp story. You watch The Sopranos, I see pulp motifs in that throughout the whole thing. So pulp fiction was the big bang of all of these things. The movie Alien, right? The movie Alien, which we all love. The guy that I can't remember the director's name. It's coming off. I can't.
Ridley Scott, right?
Ridley Scott. And the writer that was on that, I can't remember his name either. But they were asked. The writer was asked, "So where'd you get the ideas for this movie?" He goes, "Well, I got it from the old sci-fi stories." He goes, "And you know what? I didn't steal from anybody. I stole from everybody." Is what he said, which is awesome because the alien rules. The movie The Thing is based off of an old pulp thing. So like the Terminator, all of these stories, all of these great sci-fi movies that we love are just directly lifted. They're not new ideas. And then obviously the immortal, insurmountable influence of the giant H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft defined how we tell spooky stories today. You can't write. We can't even people have never heard of Lovecraft. If they try to come up with a scary story, his DNA is in it. It's like people say you can't criticize the idea of philosophy or criticize Plato without criticizing philosophy itself. You can't criticize H.P. Lovecraft without criticizing horror itself. He is horror. That's why these efforts to cancel him, because he said had naughty ideas back in the day, will fail forever, because we can't have horror without Lovecraft. Period.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these are the, people that we should be, reading, venerating, and, to the extent that, I hope the pod is exposing our listeners to, these authors and stories, more. Please look into them, because they are the foundation of the stuff that we enjoy today.
All of your favorite horror movies, all of them. The directors were obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft. You can't find one that isn't. All of them. Or guys like, another guy, Clark Ashton Smith, who is part of kind of what I call the pulp trial, or the weird fiction triality. Those guys, you can't mess with them. And then you can go back further. Obviously, Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley deserves a mention. The folks from the Victorian, the Gothic horror era, these guys were absolutely immense as well. And then there was kind of folks that were going into cosmic horror and weird fiction during the middle period. Arthur Machen, Chambers, Robert Chambers, William Hope Hodgson, Ambrose Bierce. Like, guys, if you have not read these people show that in our time period, in our epoch, we made beautiful things, incredible things. That if we took the great minds of the ancient world and the medieval and Renaissance world, and we sat them down and showed it to them, they would think it was fucking dope. You could take Homer and sit him down and be like, "Here, read Tower of the Elephant, read read Lord of the Rings, read all of this stuff. Watch Terminator 2," and he would think that it's awesome. They would be proud of us, and they would be proud of the people that were influential on us just the day before yesterday. The lineage never stopped. We weren't cut off. We're not men among the ruins. It's not over. We don't even need to be back. We never left.
There we go. To kind of jump into the subgenres that Bizarchives publishes, we mentioned earlier biopunk, cosmic horror, cyberpunk, epic fantasy, sword and sorcery. who are some of the authors, not just the authors that are on our side publishing today, but the authors in somewhat more recent history who stick out as these are guys who you should read. So, like, what's your take on William Gibson? What's your take on Robert Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke? And who am I missing here?
Um, with Gibson. So, Neuromancer is one of the greatest things ever written.
Okay.
Neuromancer, with its predictive qualities, the story itself. He literally coined words that we use in a technical way now. Cyberspace.
Yeah.
He invented that word. That book is uh, probably more influential on the technocrats that we all complain about than something like Karl Marx or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, guys from Microsoft and Facebook and Google, these programmers that are coming out with this real spooky technocratic crap, they literally say Neuromancer influenced them.
I
These
believe
type,
it.
yeah, and
Like
in
I
fact,
read Neuromancer, and that was like in the early 2010s. And I'm like, wait a minute, this guy is describing the internet in like the 1980s.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's pretty
It's
perceptive.
pretty spooky that he came up with that. It's genius, absolute genius. So yeah, cyberpunk is a wonderful version of sci-fi, and I think first of all, I don't go too hard with subgenres and genres. I think that they're fun to talk about these categories and where they come from. But
Mm.
if for us now, it's awesome to take bits and pieces from every bin
Yeah.
to create something completely weird. So, but there's nothing wrong with if doing a traditional tale. We published many tales that, for example, with Lovecraftian tales, they start out with an academic or a reporter, and he follows a trail on a spooky book or an artifact, and he comes into contact with some sort of weird entity, makes him go insane. So we've told that story could be told over and over again, and it's tried and true, and there's nothing wrong with it. But you can also mix and match. So I'm not somebody that says, here is your formula. I say death to formulas. Just tell us something dope from the abyss of your weird imagination. Cook up something bizarre. Do it. That's my point. That's what I say.
There we
But
go.
when we talk about things like biopunk is like cyberpunk. So there's really only one punk. There's punks have just gone nuts, right? There's steampunk, which I don't even consider it. I think steampunk sucks. I don't like the
Mm.
aesthetic of it. I think it's corny. It makes no sense, really.
Mm.
Cyberpunk makes sense, and even biopunk makes sense.
Mm.
Diesel punk makes sense. Steampunk does not make sense because under steampunk, that's a whole other thing, right? It's just a bunch of people that want to wear weird costumes. That's all.
Yeah.
It's gay, in my opinion. But biopunk and things like diesel punk is just a way to describe the era of the world wars.
Okay.
Something like so that's that. And then you also mentioned so cyberpunk. Let's go back to cyberpunk. Let's take a step back to science fiction. What is science fiction? Science fiction in its science fiction proper and its tradition, in my opinion, is a very mythopoetic. It is our mythopoetic storytelling device. So are things like sword and sorcery mythopoetic? Obviously, because they're like King Arthur, they're like Beowulf, etc., etc. They have swords and magic and great cosmogonies and all of these mythopoetic elements. Well, what is mythopoetics? Mythopoetics is like storytelling motifs associated with telling the story of a people, of a folk, and it has to do with their origins and the beginning, right? The mythos of a people that define their identity. And for us, that's things like sword and sorcery and fantasy, Lord of the Rings, etc. Those are mythopoetic. Lord of the Rings is super mythopoetic because it even goes into it has like their the beginning of the universe and like all these
Yeah.
ages. And Conan and Howard has that as well. Cycles of ages, cyclical time, and all that, or helixical time, however you want to describe it. However, going into cyberpunk and science fiction for our modern epoch, that is our mythological or our mythopoetic way of storytelling, because mythopoetics has to do with eschatology of a people.
Oh yeah, sure.
Eschatology is your origin, but also your doom. And science fiction is concerned with our doom because it is telling the story of what happens to humanity when we dive into technology and we relinquish our technology or our humanity in favor of technology. So if you go read the original science fiction works, it has to do with mad scientists. It has to do with technology gone awry. It has to do with alien invasions. It has to do with the effects that technology has on us going forward. It wasn't like Star Trek. I reject Star Trek entirely. I liked it at one point, but I reject it. It's fake and gay. It's just, it's like, it's just completely just progressive horseshit. Oh, we've invented all of our problems away, and now all that's left is us to go into the universe and make friends with aliens, and that's it. And that's why it sucks. It's something like War of the Worlds, or something like The Time Machine, or something like Neuromancer, or something like all of these things tells a story of what happens when dealing with outsideness or trying to play God and become creators of a new thing will sow the seeds of our doom. And this is exactly what cyberpunk displays, is what happens amidst or after we do that. When we get into a world where we abandon our humanity and we accept our future as machines, as no longer humans, and the consequences and the dystopia that occurs when we do this. So science fiction is not a worship of science. And in fact, it is the opposite. It is the warning of science and the nervousness associated with how science and technology will change the very blueprint of what it means to be human. So when you look at cyberpunk and science fiction and these things, it's not like Star Wars. You could say that Star Wars has science fiction elements, but Star Wars is a fantasy, right? This is science fantasy, or some people will describe it as a planetary opera or planetary romance. And this is exactly what it is. Now you could go into Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune, which I think is on the level of Lord of the Rings as far as its vastness and epicness and brilliance. There's only going to be one Dune. Nobody can ever replicate that. Frank Herbert was a genius. That was one off. That's it, in my opinion. And Dune tells a similar story. It is a world in and of itself and shows the ages of a people as they reap the consequences of technology, being thinking machines and the Butlerian jihad, and then going into what happens when you abandon your humanity. It has a very populist kind of a vibe to it. What's brilliant about Dune is it doesn't have a singular narrative. All of the factions and people and characters in Dune have their own narratives and have their own agendas, and they're all competing for one another. And this is what's so brilliant about Dune. And this is why Dune is immortal. It's not trying to thrust something upon somebody. Going back to this, it's not trying to preach to you, but it's letting you inhabit this world where all of these characters are part of this ecosystem that are all trying to compete with one another and have their own stories, their own philosophies, and their own narratives. So at the end of the day, science fiction is a warning of technology, not a worship of it. And that is why I think that a lot of modern sci-fi sucks and a lot of modern fantasy sucks, because fantasy is literally just a transposing of modern liberal modernity, just like in a world where there's magic and stuff. Me and my buddies call it Seattle with elves. They just create Seattle with elves. That's all they do. They don't have caste systems. They don't have no noble birth. They don't have any sort of religiosity, which is a huge part of the modern world or the ancient world or the medieval world, that defined who they were. right? It's like, oh, well, everybody can just be who you are. It's personal autonomy. There's no sort of clan obligations, which if and this is because you have these people that have no interest in learning about history. The greats that we've been mentioning over and over again, the fantasy writers, they read the source materials. They were reading the transcripts. They were reading the ancient stuff, and that's what informed their fantasy. Now we are in a time where fantasy informed fantasy informed fantasy, and they don't even know what the ancient world looked like, and that's why it sucks. Because number one, it's not in line with how we understand history. It's not in line with human nature. It's not even in line with unhuman nature, I guess you could say, where you have lizard men falling in love with goblins and all this dumb shit. Right?
Yeah,
Here's the deal: is like a say you had like a reptilian race, an intelligent reptilian race. The mind of that creature is going to be alien to you. You can't fall in
absolutely.
love with a reptile. That reptile sees you as food. And even if it can talk, and even if you can negotiate with it, if it gets hungry, it will eat you. And you
Mm,
can never trust it. You can't fucking fall in love with it. You
yeah,
can't fall in love with like here's the deal is the reason that in Lord of the Rings that Aragorn, who was a Numenorian, which wasn't really like a normal human, was a Numenorian, could fall in love with, I can't remember her name, the elf in that story, is because they both have super long lifespans.
mm,
A normal human can't fall in love and understand an elf in like a fantasy setting. An elf that's immortal or even lives thousands of years has a completely different relationship with their own mortality and sees reality. They perceive reality a completely different way. These are the types of things that modern fantasy writers, one, don't take into account because they don't want to, because it's problematic for their ideology, and two, just aren't creative or smart enough to consider. And you don't need to put exposition for these things into your stories. You don't have to explain it at all. You could just have it, show how it functions. And people, readers, especially like good readers, will pick up on that and understand it innately. Period.
absolutely. It strikes me that today the current environment with regard to uh, political, the regime's propaganda, what have you, plus technology, the the environment is ripe for a a science fiction renaissance, I would think, a renaissance in cyberpunk because it certainly seems that if the eschatology of our time, our era, is the kind of disastrous consequences of technology and ideology combining to undermine human nature, well, that's, unfortunately where it seems we're headed in many respects. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this juncture, where you are, where, the writers on our side are, is a great place to be because you're working with some great material and great motivation.
Yeah, it's important that we talk about we talk about these ideas and we critique what is wrong with modern literature because this is an age where people don't read books. We're talking about all these people don't sell books. Well, they're not selling books because people don't read books. And
Yeah.
what has happened is that especially young men don't just not read books because they're playing video games and all this stuff, which is also true. They're not reading books because young men were chased out of literature, right? I remember
Absolutely.
my English teacher, I think it was seventh or eighth grade, I can't remember. She told me that Conan was for boneheads.
Mm.
And then we go and we read a book called Holes. I don't know if you remember that book. Remember that book?
I don't, but I can imagine.
It was, it's okay, I guess, but it was not even, it doesn't hold a candle as far as poeticism, as far as like craft,
Mm.
objectively inferior in style and delivery as Hour of the Dragon or Red Nails or Devil in Iron or People of the Black Circle or whatever. It's she told me, oh, that's for boneheads. Read this. And I was like, this sucks. And then as we get older, we go into high school, we read these, supposed American classics, these literary fictions, you know, of mice and men, and which, I guess, I saw the movie, and I appreciate the movie and I respect the movie, and I'm not ripping on it too hard. But if you're 14 years old or 15 years old, do you want to read Of Mice and Men? Do you want to read To Kill a Mockingbird? Or do you want to read Princess of Mars? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
They have literally alienated young men in their imagination by cutting their imagination out of their bodies like it's a cancerous tumor. And it is such an awful crime. And we have so much work to do to rekindle the love of reading in young men. And the way I think that we do it is with excitement, with sensation, with weirdness, with some stuff that's a little bit edgy, blood and guts and mayhem and turbo violence and grim dark and fantasy and magic and heroes and muscular gods and wizards and sexy ladies and, all of the above, monsters from outer space and all this kind of shit. Because just getting them to open a book and to see the magic in the world of the book is a battle in and of itself, right?
Absolutely.
Because before we went to the stars, before we invented great things, people imagined them. Without imagination, we have nothing. And unfortunately, the young generation walking around today have had their imagination cut from their souls. And instead, they are now completely just, their minds are numbed by the crap that they're into. I like video games too. I love video games. I grew up in the age we're the OG gamers.
No, we are. Yeah,
we are the OGs.
I play Nintendo and Sega and all that shit.
We're the OGs with the Nintendos and the Sega Genesis. We're the OGs with the first computer games. Dude, these guys playing Fortnite. It's like, dude, I already played that. It was called Unreal Tournament. It was called Quake.
Yeah, Medal of Honor. I played the first one on PlayStation.
Hell yeah.
The first Medal of I remember playing it and thinking like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is World War II, it seems realistic. And like now, like 20 years later, it's Medal of Honor.
Yeah. Yeah, hell yeah. Like I will boomer post right now. I was doing this shit before you kids even like this. I'm the OG of that. So I love it. I do. I love video games. I think video games are great. I'm not one of those people that knocks on it. I think we need to put more energy into video games, but we also need to protect books, right? And books they deliver they do something special with your mind. They put a movie into your mind. They transpose from words. It's magic. It truly is magic. If you read the Poetic Edda, right? If you know the story of Odin when he gets pinned to the world tree for 9 nights and sacrifices himself onto himself, and he puts his eye in the well and learns the secret of the runes. What he's talking about is the magic of writing. You got to keep in mind, to our ancestors, writing, literacy, which there's an argument to be made that literacy made people dumber, but you got to think, to people that invented writing, these shapes put ideas in your head. To look at these shapes and in your head, you hear ideas. You can, that is magic. That is magic. When people think magic, they think Harry Potter and wizards and fireballs and Dungeons and Dragons. That's not what magic is. Magic is what we consider mundane and we take for granted today. Books are magic because you read these just. It's all it is paper, ink, and that's it. Cardstock. And you look at it and you decipher from the shapes on the page an entire world, an entire movie, visualization in your mind. That is magic. And Absolutely. That does something special for your brain. And we need to give this back to young men and young women too. Literature for women is abysmal now. I can't tell you, we have a lot of female readers, the Bizarchives. It's not just for guys.
Great. Yeah.
We have a ton of female readers that love our books because what's out there now is not what they like. Women don't want to read a story with a girl boss that like slaughters men and carries a sword that weighs more than herself. They don't
Yeah.
want to read about a woman in a love triangle that treats men like shit. Your normal woman that's of sound mind loves her father. She loves her brothers. She loves the men in
Yeah.
her life. She doesn't need this like feminist fantasy where she treats men like shit. She
Yeah.
wants to read stories where, she loves men, where the women and the men fall in love in a wholesome way, wholesome, true romance. That's what she wants to read. She wants to read about them overcoming things. Women like spooky stuff for some reason. They're attracted to it. They want to see this kind of stuff. They're not really as attracted to science fiction and stuff that we are, but there needs to be fantasy and imaginative literature that appeals to women too. And we don't even try. We don't go writing books saying, "Oh, we want to write this for girls too." We just write what we think is good books, and they like it. They like mystery. They like weirdness. They like esoteric motifs. They like thrills and chills, just like men do. And literature that's aimed at women nowadays has alienated them too. So our goal is to give the people back literature in an accessible, awesome way that doesn't alienate them.
And I think you are doing a great job getting that done, Dave. We're nearing the 2 hour mark, so I think it might be time to begin to wrap it up. But that being said, please, this is your forum. If you have anything upcoming you want to plug, have at it. The Bizarchives, Volume 5, that came out in August. Everyone should buy it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Dan, for having me on. I'm very grateful for you
Absolutely.
and guys like you and your crew. And I see what you guys are doing. And I'm so busy. I don't really have time to interact with everybody and stuff like that. But I notice and I see what you're doing New Right and what you guys are
Oh,
doing
thanks. Yeah,
in your sphere. And shout out to all the guys on Twitter that are kind enough to let me come on and hoot and holler and shout and all this kind of stuff. It's just it's a beautiful thing. There's a lot of love in what we're doing now. It's like
absolutely.
it's a brotherhood. It's a community. It's all this kind of stuff, and it's very special. And I'm very very grateful for it. I cherish it. It's truly a gift. So for you guys out there that might not be familiar with me or the Bizarchives, you can go over to the bizarchives.com. That is TheBizarchives.com. And you can go buy books. We have lots of great books in and around $10. You can't beat it. Like Mr. Dan said, the Bizarchives issue 5, which dropped in August. That's just, man, it's really done well. Folks really, really enjoy it. I'm very, very blessed and proud that folks really enjoyed that we can continue to deliver on the same level that we do. So Bizarchives issue 5 has a lot of great stories in it, man. A lot of great. I'm in there with a story. Some people reached out to me, said my story in Bizarchives 5 is the best one I ever did. It's called Human Candles. It's a really weird supernatural set in 1800s Philadelphia, and there's weird science stuff. So, guys, go check that out. Lots of other great authors in there, names that you'll recognize. A fellow named Paul Fahrenheit, who's
Oh yeah, friend of the pod.
He's always a friend of the pod here. He's over on doing his thing on Twitter. He's in there with, I believe it's his debut fiction work. So he's in there.
Awesome.
Guys like A. Cuthbertson, M.S. Jones, C.P. Webster, Arbogast, all in there. So all your favorites are in there. And we have so many other great books that are out there too. Cosmic Horror double feature, Spire. If you like cosmic horror, the Molybdus Articulate from my good friend and kinsman Shane Hawks. The Molybdus Articulate is really freaky. It's probably the only book we ever put out that I had people email me, tell me it's too disturbing to finish. And I had an older lady email me, and she said she didn't want to leave a bad review. But she said this book was too disturbing for her to finish. And I was like, you know what? I take that as a compliment. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You. So yeah, that book is pretty weird, really, really out there. We have some great fantasy stuff. M.S. Jones, The Chronicles of Heraldria, Sacred Times Part 2 is about to drop any week now. So if you're a fan of Tolkien or Wheel of Time or anything like that, you got to get that. It's really, really great stuff. If you like noir, Arbogast's Shanghai Horror is off the chain. If you like weird, spooky detective stories, what else we got? The Horror Beneath by C.P. Webster. C.P. Webster is just a giant. That's just a tremendous tale. Who else do we got up? Man, we have. I'm like forgetting. If you like Cyberpunk, Spire by A. Cuthbertson is fantastic. And man, what else is in? And then also all of our reprints: Masters of Horror, The Willows, Man of the 25th Century, freaking. What else we got? I can't even think.
It's an incredible body of work here.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff. I'm starting
No,
to have trouble.
No, absolutely. Go on.
Have Joel keep track of the catalog. Pretty soon, I'm gonna have to have like a sheet in front of me or something. Anyway,
it's one of those good problems.
Yeah, it is a good problem to have, but all in and around $10. We're actually sold out in the store on a lot of this stuff. So you have to go. You can follow the links on the website over to Amazon, and Amazon delivers all over the world. It's priced similar to how it is on our website. So you have to go through them. Follow us on Twitter and Telegram at the Bizarchives, and just stay tuned. Our Substack is dope. Our Substack is dope. I'm very proud of it. It's an awesome publication that kind of helps us with auxiliary funds. So if you own all of our books, or maybe you have a couple books and some of the other books aren't really your style or your preference, go check out our Substack. I think it's only $5 a month. You can sign up and you get, we give discounts out. We got articles that come out. We have a series. We haven't had a submission for it, but we went called Paranormal Transmissions, where guys give in their eyewitness accounts of the paranormal. And some of it is pretty weird. We've had some people that saw Bigfoot, have some people that have UFO stories, ghost stories, some really, really crazy stuff. So go over, check out Paranormal Transmissions over there. We also have a merch site that has some really dope stuff for you gym bros out there that want to invoke the power of the eldritch forces of the great old ones. You could get a tank top for when you go into the Temple of Iron called Eldritch Strength. And it's got Cthulhu on there, and he's all jacked and yoked. So you get some of that. So we got lots of stuff going on. We're getting into film, getting into games, getting into everything. So stay tuned. You could go sub for free on the Substack. Follow us on Twitter, Telegram, all that.
Thank you for coming on, Dave. Buy books. There we go. That is my admonition to you New Right listeners. Buy books, buy Dave's books. It's good stuff.